Hello everyone, welcome to Teaching Music Online with Soundtrap. My name is Matt Claus. I'm an assistant professor of music education at Ithaca College, and I'm excited to share some ideas about using virtual instruments, recording audio, and doing songwriting projects as well as virtual ensembles using this very accessible and affordable digital audio workstation called Soundtrap. So there are three things that you'll need to make the most of this workshop. One is a Soundtrap account. If you don't already have one, you can get one for free through soundtrap.com. The second is a pair of headphones. Recording, especially audio, works best when you are using headphones so that the microphone doesn't pick up a backing track or metronome. And the third thing is an instrument or voice. So we're going to be making some music in Soundtrap today, so please have something handy that you can experiment with. This workshop is structured in two parts. The first part will look at virtual instruments, so we'll look at some project ideas as well as demonstrations and hands-on activities for working with virtual instruments in Soundtrap. And then the second part of the workshop will focus on recording audio. So we'll look at some projects that have used audio recordings in Soundtrap and also do some demonstrations of recording real audio with Soundtrap. So right here, I'm in my Soundtrap dashboard, and just a few navigation things to get us used to this platform. We can see that I have some tabs here, my projects, my groups, EDU admin. So I use an educator's account, so this allows me to manage the seats that are in our account. There are many lesson plans in Soundtrap, so if you wanted to search by your grade level or content area, there are great lesson plans right here on the website, as well as additional resources for learning how to use Soundtrap and some project ideas. So what are virtual instruments? Virtual instruments are software-based instruments that use MIDI information to record, create, playback the instruments that you hear in your project. So there are general MIDI sounds that we're probably very familiar with. That's what you hear when you play back a score, and it sounds very computer-based. It doesn't sound like a real instrument. But there are also MIDI sounds and sound banks of MIDI instruments that are real recordings of real instruments. And when that instrument is triggered by a MIDI note or MIDI information, it triggers a recording of that real instrument. So some MIDI recordings can have very realistic sounds, and a lot of the MIDI sounds that are in Soundtrap are like that. They sound like real instruments because they are recordings of real instruments. There are a lot of benefits to working with virtual instruments. They can easily be transposed into any key, or the tempo can be adjusted. The instrument itself can be changed from a saxophone to a flute to a guitar, all without losing any sound quality that you would if you were making some tempo or transposition changes with real audio. MIDI information can easily be edited too. So if a note is performed at the wrong time, that can be fine-tuned and adjusted, or if a wrong pitch is performed, it can be moved up and down until it is the correct note. So virtual instruments really offers a lot of capabilities with using instruments that we might have access to, and also making adjustments after we've recorded them. And you can create virtual instrument or MIDI parts either by using a MIDI controller that's plugged into your computer, and Soundtrap will work with MIDI controllers. You can also use your computer keyboard or simply your mouse and drawing in the instruments. So let's take a look at what some of these are. So in Soundtrap, I'm going to click on Add New Track. And then all of these tracks that are not voice and microphone and guitar, bass, amp, all of these other tracks are going to be virtual instruments. So let's start with the drum and beats virtual instruments. So the default view setting in Soundtrap for the drum and beats track is this patterns view that shows a grid that we can click these tiles on or off, and by clicking them on, it will trigger the sound, and by clicking them again, it will turn the sound off. We can experiment by placing these instruments on different subdivisions of the beat. So right now we are in 4/4 time, and each one of these sections of tiles represents one beat in the measure. So this would be 1, and then 16th note subdivisions of beat 1. This is beat 2, 16th note subdivisions, and so on. And then this number 2 here represents the second measure of the song. When writing drum beats, this cycle tool is very helpful because it allows us to cycle a certain section of music while we write it. So for example, I'm just going to cycle the first measure of my song, and as I do that, I can draw in or trigger the kick, snare, and hi-hat and hear what it sounds like in real time. You can also change the sound of your drum set. And you can add additional drum set instruments. Soundtrap also offers an instrument view where you can play physically on a touchscreen device, or I'm using a mouse on my computer screen, the different instruments of the drum kit. You could also use the computer keyboard. So now I'm pressing A on my computer keyboard and the kick drum is playing. So this is another way to experiment with different drum kit sounds to create a pattern in Soundtrap. Finally, the third view is the piano roll view. This is something you may be familiar with if you've worked with GarageBand. So this is a representation of the MIDI data. So we can see here that the hi-hat is a G flat. So if we had a MIDI controller plugged in and we played a G flat or an F sharp on the MIDI controller, that would sound a hi-hat. And that's pretty much universal, actually. If you're working in GarageBand or Finale or Sibelius and you use an F sharp just above C1 on a MIDI controller, it will produce a hi-hat sound. Similarly, a C1 is going to be a kick and a D is going to be a snare. So as I mentioned before, because this is a virtual instrument using MIDI data, we can easily move these instruments around, either to create a new instrument or pitch, or to change where they're placed in the measure. So now this is now on the upbeat of 1 instead of the downbeat. Now that I have a drum beat that I like, I think I'm going to add a bass line. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and expand this cycle to be, we'll go with 2 measures. I'm going to create a 2 measure long bass line. And just like GarageBand, I can click and drag the top right corner of this region to make this loop last 2 measures instead of 1. And of course I could go as far as I would like. But right now I'm just working on 2 measures of material. So now I'll click Add New Track and add a new virtual instrument, this time a bass, to create a bass line. I think the default instrument here is an electric guitar. So I'm going to change this to an electric bass. And you can audition the sounds by clicking these arrows. That one will work. So now I'm using the keys on my computer keyboard. I'm not using a MIDI controller, I'm using the keys. And if I type Z, that's going to be a C. If I type D, that's going to be an E flat. And if I type V, that's going to be an F. So it's arranged so that the physical layout of the computer keyboard matches the white and black keys of a piano keyboard. Alright, so I can see what that looks like here in the piano roll. I think I wanted that E flat to be longer, and I definitely wanted it to be on the upbeat right there. And I wanted that to be on the downbeat as well. So you could just click and drag these until they are in the right place. I think I wanted this on the upbeat of 3. There we go. Now we could also add other virtual instruments like pianos, and you could record by playing the notes on the computer keyboard. You could also draw them in using the piano roll. So I'm going to go from a C minor to an F major. Here we go. So similarly, we could hear that was not perfectly in time. So instead of moving these by hand, I'm going to take all of these, right click, and then quantize to, let's say, the half note. So quantization takes everything you've recorded and then snaps it perfectly in time. Of course, just like GarageBand, there are also pre-recorded loops that you can add to your compositions or arrangements, but having students generate their own musical ideas is certainly preferable. So let's say I wanted to take these two measures of music and copy and paste them all the way through measure 8. I can highlight all of them and then loop them like this. So now I have 8 measures of music, a full section. So right now I'm in C minor. I could even set the key to be C minor right here. And if I wanted to change this to another key, I could simply click on the key and then switch to F minor, and that will transpose everything into a new key. And let's say I wanted to put it in D minor instead. So that's one of the benefits of working with virtual instruments. You can easily change the key. We could also change the tempo. So one project you can do with students to use virtual instruments is a cover song project, having them recreate all of the parts of a popular song using virtual instruments in Soundtrap. A great resource is the Jam Zone at Little Kids Rock. You can search for all beginner level songs and then find charts that have all of the instruments that you'll need to recreate. So so 22 here by Taylor Swift has guitar, bass, drums, and keyboard. So we can click on the drum part and then take one of these sections and then program this into Soundtrap. If you're also on Zoom or Google Meets, you can have students work collaboratively in groups and breakout rooms on a Soundtrap project to recreate all of the different parts together. So if you had 4 students in a group, one person could write the drum part while another person could write the bass line. And to invite members to your Soundtrap project, you simply click on this collaborator button and you can invite other people in your class or school to work on the project either at the same time or asynchronously. And that's really one of the benefits of using Soundtrap. I can't think of any other sound recording platforms, other digital audio workstations that allow multiple people to be all working on the same project in different spaces at different times and to be able to collaborate just like you would on a Google Doc, for example, making changes and updating and syncing to see your partner's updates in real time. So now I'd like to show a video of a group of my students using the Little Kids Rock Jam Zone and Soundtrap to work collaboratively to produce cover songs, and then we come back into our Zoom meeting space and present them one by one in a Jimmy Fallon style Name That Song challenge. And okay, so it's recording now. Okay, so welcome to Name That Song challenge, inspired by the Jimmy Fallon show. We have 5 wonderful teams here who have spent 30 minutes recreating, using virtual instruments, a popular music song. And we'll start with breakout room 5, which is Al, Christian, and Courtney. If one of you could please share your screen and share your computer audio. And I'm going to keep an eye on the participants window. When you think you know the answer, go ahead and raise your hand. And in just a moment, we'll stop the recording and I will see if we correctly named that song. So Al, go ahead.
All right,
and if everyone else can mute your microphones.
Great. All right. Have fun.
The first hand to go up was Justine. Justine, name that song.
Despacito.
Was that right, Al?
It was.
Excellent. So Justine was in breakout room 3. So Sarah, please record 1 point for breakout room 3. Way to represent, Justine. Perfect. All right, if you feel like you can name that song, go ahead and raise your hand in the participants window. Okay, Greg. Thanks. I think we've heard enough. The first person to raise their hand was Justine. Justine, name that song.
Havana.
Greg, was that correct? Way
Yeah.
to go. All right. So, Sarah, please record another point for Breakout Room 3. Wow. Y'all, you got to get together. Breakout Room 3 is running away with this competition. All right. This is it. It looks like Breakout Room 3 might be the winner. Although this last example is worth 100 points, so it's anyone's game. Breakout Room 1, we've got Caroline, James, Juliet, and Mike. If you could please, if someone could share their screen and share their audio so we can name that song. Look at the hands going up. Now go ahead and add the bass. All right, for 1,000,000 points, Al, can you name that song?
Believer by Imagine Dragons.
Whoa, way to go. What an unexpected turn of events at the last minute. Breakout Room 5 runs away with the lead. Sorry, Breakout Room 3, that was a close game. Justine is not happy with me right now. But don't worry, there'll be more games ahead for sure.
I went to the button and it didn't go.
The classic "my buzzer was stuck" line. Yeah, we've heard that before. All right, everybody, thanks for playing Name That Song Challenge with us. I think that was way better than the Tonight Show, so I think we're on to something. Way to go, everybody. Thanks for participating. The next part of this session will focus on recording real audio. So up until this point, we've been working with virtual MIDI software-based instruments. Presumably, many of us will want our students to record their real voice or instrument, and Soundtrap is a great tool for doing that. So I'm going to go back into the studio here, and I'm going to add a vocal track, a voice and microphone track, to my project. Now, Soundtrap has some built-in effects that are really nice. This parametric EQ, and there's reverb. So there's already some nice effects to make the most of this voice track if you're not familiar with how to add effects like these. If you are familiar with effects, you can add a compressor or other really interesting tools that will help you shape the sound of your voice or instrument. This button right here is a really useful tool. This is a volume check, and students can use this to test the level of their microphone, so they should sing or speak or use their instrument as loudly as they would in the recording, and Soundtrap will automatically adjust the volume level to prevent it from clipping in the recording. It's best to use headphones when recording audio with Soundtrap, otherwise your microphone will pick up the previously recorded tracks or a metronome, other things that you don't want in your vocal track or instrument track channel. And start recording. Hello everyone, welcome to Teaching Music Online with Soundtrap. Alright, so a few basic editing functions when working with audio that are really useful. The zoom tool allows us to get very precise with our recordings. So for example, if I wanted my voice or instrument to come in at measure 2, I can zoom in until I see very clearly when this sound wave begins. And I can move the cursor there. I'm going to turn snap to grid off, and this will allow me to be very specific with where I place the cursor. If the snap to grid is on, then this cursor will snap to a subdivision of the beat, and I want to be able to get in much more detail. So I'm going to place the cursor right here, and then you can use edit and split region. If you also remember the keyboard command, that can be a helpful shortcut. And now I can move this to the beginning of the second measure. And if I want to be very precise, I might turn the snap to grid on and move this so that it lines up perfectly with the beginning of the second measure. Hello everyone, welcome to Teaching Music Online with Soundtrap. So when you combine the process of using virtual instruments and then recording a real audio track, you can use these skills for a songwriting activity in which students create drum beats, bass lines, chord progressions, and a spoken track or sung track. Here are some objectives related to an activity just like that. We also now have the skills to create virtual ensembles. And an ensemble could be anything. It could be a single person recording multiple versions of themselves to create an ensemble. An ensemble could be a duet. It could with two collaborators, or it could be a quartet with two collaborators playing two instruments or two voice parts. So there's really, technology allows us so many ways to create ensembles in traditional and non-traditional ways. Here are some objectives and related core art standards for creating a virtual ensemble project. We created virtual ensembles at Ithaca College using Soundtrap, and we invited students in sections to individual projects. So we had a soprano 1 section and a soprano 2 section, and then all the students worked together. This is the soprano 1, for example. All the students worked together to record their parts, and the director would send comments back to them, and they would go in and redo certain sections based on the director's feedback. So in the way, Soundtrap allowed us to create an ensemble experience with feedback from a director and a chance for students to hear their part together with all of their peers when it was not possible to do so in person. So once each individual section had recorded their audio part, we put them all together into a Soundtrap project that featured each section. So right here, we're looking at all of the voice parts as well as 3 soloists for a new composition titled The World, This Wall, and Me. So in Soundtrap, we can solo individual tracks. We can hear there's been some reverb applied to these tracks, and then here are all of the sections coming in. So after we had received all of the students' voice parts and they had been refined and edited and they've gone back and made corrections, then we put them all together into this project, and then they created videos to go along with it. So we actually captured those videos in Flipgrid and then synchronized the videos together in Final Cut Pro to create a virtual ensemble video project that you'll see here.
Broken memories, I will I can build a rainbow. This is where I am.
The virtual ensemble project we just watched was a collaboration between the Ithaca College Choir and a music education class called Contemporary Ensembles. The Contemporary Ensemble students worked together to edit the audio together in Soundtrap groups over Zoom, and then we compiled all of the edits together to make the product that you saw there. Editing a virtual ensemble does take a lot of time, so the more that students can be hands-on in the editing experience, the better. As I mentioned before, Soundtrap allows us to reimagine what ensembles could be. And it doesn't have to be different students playing different roles. It could be a single student playing multiple roles in an ensemble. If you're interested in learning more about these projects, please refer to the interactive web links in the handout. They will direct you to YouTube tutorials I've created for a variety of Soundtrap projects, including creating podcasts, beatbox compositions, one-person rounds, other multi-selfing projects, and even editing audio and video together. If you have any questions about Soundtrap or designing projects for your students, please don't hesitate to contact me at mclaws@ithaca.edu. Thank you.